Hey there, just before we get into the podcast, a quick reminder, we could use your financial help. Please support us on Patreon so we can keep on keeping on. Check the Patreon links to donate. Hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hello once again, this is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, your favorite literary podcast, I'm sure. Dennis Rimmer, your host here. With us today we have from back east in the Toronto area, Joseph Kertes. His latest book is Last Impressions. But before we get onto that, sir, I understand you came to Canada in 1956 from Hungary. So how old were you at that time?
I was 4 when we escaped. I was 5 when we got here, but 4 when we escaped.
Now that was the Hungarian Revolution era?
It was, yes. It was a revolution of the Hungarians against the Russians. The Russians liberated Hungary from the Germans in 1945, but never left. They squandered on Hungary.
Right.
And finally, in 1956, some brave Hungarians rose up against them and were eventually squashed. But at the time, several 100,000 Hungarians, including us, were able to escape.
So when you say escape, you actually escaped. You weren't just allowed to leave without any fuss.
Oh, no. There was no such thing. No, we weren't allowed, period. No. In fact, we were... It was terrible. I have very vivid memories, even though I was only 4 at the time. For example, my grandmother came to get me from a preschool activity in Budapest, and we had to pass the Octagon, which is kind of a central square in Budapest, and there was a massive crowd that had formed there, and I couldn't understand why. And my grandmother tried to drag me home, and I looked up and I saw that there was a Hungarian soldier hanging from every single lamppost.
And you remember this, of course.
I remember that vividly.
Oh.
And then that night we escaped by foot in the middle of the night, by foot across the border into Austria after taking a train. But when we were crossing in the night, crossing this field, bombs kept going off, and my older brother kept looking up to see who was dropping them, and nobody was, and he was yelling, "What is going on?" And then finally my grandmother told us that we were crossing a minefield.
Oh, God. Yes.
So it was very memorable.
Yeah, to say the least. Well, that's interesting, because there must have been quite a few from Hungary who came to Canada. I remember I grew up in White Rock, Crescent Beach, south of Vancouver there, and one of the guys I went to junior high school with, I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning his name, his last name was Dombavari, and he came to Canada in 1956 as well, so he'd be about the same age, I guess, because I'm just 70, and I think you're 69 or so.
Yeah, 68. Yes, I'll be 69 in November. That's right.
Yeah, we were in the same grade, so he'd be about the same age with about the same experiences. So, wow.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and we're going to Budapest in November, taking a cruise on the Danube. So,
nice. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing that, because it's 2 cities, right? Buda on one side and Pest on the other, the river.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. They're 2 old cities that have been fused or by 5 wonderful bridges. So, but you're going to have a great time. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. It's like extraordinarily beautiful, actually.
Oh, good. I can't wait, and I hope this virus stuff doesn't interfere with our plans. But
I know. When do you plan to go?
In November, late November.
So you should be all right by then.
Yeah,
I hope.
We have a cruise planned, and the company actually sent us an email saying, "Hey, if there's any problems, you have up to 24 hours before your flight leaves to cancel if you want, and you'll get a credit." So they're taking good care of us. So
you're cruising from where to where?
From Nuremberg down to Budapest.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That'll be great.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, and we're here to talk with Joseph Kertes about last impressions as well as tourist destinations. Now, last impressions, the first thing I got was that it seems a play on first impressions. So,
yes.
And it's a story about a boy, a son talking about his father, basically. And the usual interview question is, it very autobiographical, or I guess all books are.
My books are all fiction, and I do use real life and real people as starting points. But then they have their own trajectory. I mean, they go, they make their own story. Really, they determine their own fate. But the dying father in the novel is certainly inspired by my own father, who was a larger-than-life character, and who was so unself-conscious that he was, funny in the sense that we all laughed at him. Laughed at him as he, he went about his business. Sorry,
that's okay.
But he was quite a character. He really was larger than life in so many ways, and he was, he was so unself-conscious, for example, that he was like the worst driver in the country, and he was a slow bad driver, but he's like a drunken snail or something, but he drove as if there were no roads or cars for that matter, and he was quite ridiculous. So he was funny, but so. When I first wrote this book, it was kind of pure comedy, but then I realized, he had such a dark history, a dark personal history, that I gave my protagonist, who was Zoltan, the father, I gave him a kind of dark past, which resembles my own father's past. But my father had one single sibling, a brother, who went missing during World War II and was never heard from or seen again. So he was, he was almost certainly killed by something or other, whether it was typhus or a bullet or whatever. But he was killed, and my father never forgave himself for being the only survivor in his family.
So survivor guilt kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it ended up becoming a dark undercurrent in the novel, which I wrote a whole love story actually based on the brother and someone else. So it was a kind of a it was something that the father in this novel, Zoltan, could never get out from under, and yet he was not responsible for anything that happened to him. So his brother, I mean. Yeah.
Well, I flipped through it. I didn't have time to read it. We've been wrapped up in other family stuff here for the last couple of weeks. But one line that stuck out for me, if I can quote it, was Zoltan, he didn't like working for anyone, including himself. So
that's right. That's right.
I said, okay, that sounds like me. I don't like working, period, for anybody.
That's right. Well, he's a contradiction, Zoltan, because he... in fact, that's right. I mean, the Zoltan of the novel and my real father were people who had fled Hungary, and my father actually never wanted anything to do with Hungary again. He had suffered so badly, and his own mother had 12 siblings, and of course they had husbands and wives and children, and 50% of that family got wiped out, and my mother's parents and 6 siblings were murdered as well. So it was a very, very dark history, and he grew up in enormous privilege. And then it was all snatched away. So when we came to the New World, he was going to make a new life. And this was the New World, and he didn't care about Hungary anymore. He didn't care about the legacy. He didn't care about reclaiming anything. And he just wanted to be the guy who made it New World. So he looked for his own work here, but at the same time, because he had come from privilege, he didn't really want to work that hard. So he really was a contradiction in every respect.
And that's what Zoltan is like as well in the book, from the impression I get.
Yes.
And the book is, yes, Last Impressions, your latest work from Joseph Kertes, who is with us here today. Another quote, it's right on the back cover, I don't have sons, I have critics. So Kind of sounds like a lot of families. Usually it's the mother who is the critic, but it's all...
That's right. I mean, yeah, I guess we gave him a hard time, but you know what? He gave us a hard time too. So it was one kind of payback, is what it was.
Right.
So,
and this is your latest book. And other works include Winter Tulips, which was a Stephen Leacock Award winner, as nobody knows out there about Canada's famous humorist Stephen J. Leacock. And then you have Gratitude, which was a Canadian Jewish Book Award and a U.S. National Jewish Book Award winner. A couple of other books, a couple of children's books, and along the way, sir, you were the winner of the 2017 Harbourfront Festival Prize for Outstanding Contribution to Literature and the World of Letters. How does that make you feel? Must be pretty good.
It feels really good. I felt very gratified. I'm thrilled that anyone will publish me, let alone read me or give me awards. I mean, the world of writing and the world of out there are two quite different things, because you're in solitude and you're imagining life all over again, or you're inventing stuff, and you just always think, this is so stupid, it's so crappy, and yet you put it out there, and some people like it. It's very gratifying, actually. I've spent my whole working life in writing and literature. I did all my degrees in English, and I got a job at Humber College. I started a writing program there. I also started a comedy program, by the way, comedy writing and performance. So
yes,
so I really, I've had a pretty. I'm grateful for the life I've had, that's for sure.
Was there a reason your family chose Canada over, I don't know where else you would go, England, U.S., France?
Well, that's a very good question. Actually, what actually happened was that we escaped to Austria and stopped in Vienna, and my great aunt from the Bronx, from New York, met us in Vienna, and she was amazing. She gave us $1,000 and she said, I really want you to come to the Bronx. You know, we have 3 butcher shops, and we're doing really well, and we could set you up, and you'll do really well too. And that night, and my father had a cousin in Toronto who had a radio store, and that night my parents had this fantastic fight, and my dad said he's not going to New York to be a butcher. There's no way he's doing that. So they flipped a coin, and heads was Toronto. So that's why we're here.
A flip of a coin. But I guess from your viewpoint, it couldn't have worked out any better.
No, for sure. I'm so glad it went that way. Actually, this is really this place is a fool's paradise. It's so tremendous, And my dad always said that you should kiss the ground, because it's nowhere in the history of the world have people had it so good. Not everybody, obviously, but most people have had it so good.
Yeah.
And he came from enormous privilege, and yet he thought, we have everything in Canada. In addition to that, we have freedom, and we have freedom of thought, and everything we ever could possibly need. So both the character in the novel and my dad were people who wanted nothing to do with the past, as I said, but I would say, like one day I was reading a cover story in Maclean's magazine about the provenance of lost art, and I opened the story, and it was a painting from our living room, was being featured in Hungary, a painting from our living room, and it was a 17th century Hungarian master had painted it, and the story was that the Hungarian National Gallery was demanding its national treasure back from the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, and I called my parents. I said, guess what? They have our painting in Montreal. And my dad said, what do you want it for? Do you have some use for it? Can you prove it was ours? We left with what we could carry. We have enough. Heaven knows you eat enough. You have a roof over your head. You have a great job. Just leave it. Just forget it. So that's sort of the way he conducted his life.
That's great. And
there's a good lesson in that, because you have to know when you have enough.
Yes, and I know we have problems in Canada with the relationship with First Nations people and certain other things that go on. But I still am amazed that Canadians complain. They complain all the time about everything.
All the time.
I don't understand it. Because I lived for 20
right.
years in the U.S. and I really liked it, and I have lots of friends and a couple of kids and grandkids in the U.S., but hey, I don't know what's wrong with being in Canada. Know what I mean? There's pretty much nowhere else that you want to go. So,
yeah.
Oh well.
It's we're so lucky. Of course, we have those issues with the natives, and rightly so. I mean, there's no they're for sure they should feel bitter with the history, and we are trying to correct it. Maybe not fast enough, but I think we, again, like if you look at this government and the people in Canada in general, I think there's a very sympathetic view of them and of what we have done to them and how we need to make reparations. Yes.
And this is Joseph Kertes with us. The latest book is Last Impressions. Got lots of other ones out there if you want to look them up. Bookstores, libraries, a good place to get a book because you don't have to pay for it. And yes, us writers get a little check once in a while. I got $200. That's for last week from the one book that I have out there. But you mentioned there's Jewish book awards. So you're of the Jewish faith, persuasion. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I I was born Jewish. Both my parents were Jewish. I mean, I would describe myself, more as a secular Jew, but I still feel there's a strong, identification with that. But I don't really practice in any significant way. And my wife is not Jewish. She's of Greek origin. So we celebrate everything and nothing.
Right, exactly. Well, now this question I may sound like a buffoon or an ignoramus, but is being Jewish, is that a religion, an ethnicity? I mean, I could become Jewish, but I can't become Chinese. So
no, that's right. So,
or am I just being ignorant and stupid here, or? Because I really never have understood what the difference was,
So I guess the Jews were a culture, an ancient culture, but they were driven out of Judea over 2,000 years ago, and have only just recently returned. So they're actually, I guess the thing that held them together was faith and the Old Testament and all those sorts of things. So it is a religion,
yes.
But it's I have many friends who are not who don't practice a religion but are nevertheless Jewish and identify very strongly as Jewish. So it is a culture. No, you can't become Chinese. That would be
that'd be pretty hard.
Plastic surgery. So yeah, but
I'm not trying to be stupid, but it was just a question that's always been in my mind. Yeah. Like I don't understand. Like Jews are supposed to support Israel. Does that mean like Roman Catholics have to support Italy? So that's always confusing.
Good question. Good question.
Yeah.
But if you ever want to become Jewish, call me first.
Okay, and you'll give me the straight goods.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, I'm pretty much like a secular humanist kind of guy. So,
good.
Back to Joseph Kertes. His book is Last Impressions, the latest one. So you grew up in the Toronto area then, basically?
I did, yes. I had a completely staid and ordinary life after we escaped. So, yes, I not only grew up here, I did my schooling here, I did my university here, I did everything here. So, and I'm still here. So,
yes, you're still
here.
I
mean, it's. There were a number of times I thought I might move, I might leave, I might move to Halifax. I love Halifax and I love Vancouver, but we just ended up staying, and I don't regret it because it's a great country, it's a great city.
Yep, and you went to university and University of Toronto and York, and you ran into Marshall McLuhan apparently over the years. What was that? What's he like as a person? I never met him, but I saw interviews, and I have that book still of the media books.
I'll never forget that experience. He was. I was kind of a groupie of his, and so I went to U of T. I had done my VA at York, but I went to U of T to do my MA because he was there, and he was he was, all the myths about him are true. He was just this incredible genius, and he saw the world in a way which, by the way, is more relevant today than it was when, he died 40 years ago, so it was more relevant today than it was then. He foresaw things that we could never have imagined, and all of it is coming true. In fact, I thought just this morning I should write a piece about how fantastically prescient he was, and he was a kind of mythic figure even then, because he was kind of a superstar, because there were only 14 people registered in the actual graduate class, and every time I got to the classroom, there were 200 people in the room, milling around, groupies wanting to be with him, and so on and so forth. So the legend is entirely deserved in his case.
Well, he talked about the global village. He talked about radio as a hot medium and television is cool, and
that's right. And he talked about how there would be an erosion of private identity in the age of mass media, and I mean, that's the truest statement anyone's made in the modern times, because it's so hard to find the individual now, because we're so group-oriented, we're so diminished by social media. Information is inescapable. I mean, who has not heard of the coronavirus and all that? I mean, he was amazing, because that's exactly right. You can't turn your head away and not know that Sanders and Biden are running for the presidency or the Democratic Party. Everybody knows. Is there anyone in the world who has not heard of Trump?
Exactly.
Maybe the Bushmen of the Kalahari or something. But other than that,
if they're lucky, but
yeah, if they're very lucky, exactly.
So, did you? I'm assuming you read a lot as a kid, and I was just wondering if you had any favorite books you remember from being a youngster in Toronto.
Oh my goodness, I read. Yes, I did. I read a ton when I was a kid. I read. C.S. Lewis was a favorite, and of course, Lewis Carroll, and the classics made a huge impression on me, and I thought it was all the great stuff was British. I was as colonial as they come as well,
right?
And so I thought all the great stuff. I thought all the great stuff was the British. I found myself reading, the Brontes and Dickens and everybody quite early. So that's what led me to the study of English later on.
And you then ended up, as you said, starting that Humber College creative writing and comedy program. So is there a secret to comedy writing, or either you have it or you don't? Well,
so what we used to say at Humber all the time was, we can't make you funny, but we can make you funnier. Because there's a vast difference between somebody who's witty and funny and someone who can do stand-up comedy. I mean, there's a real art to. There's real art and craft to writing good sketches and writing good stand-up material and all the rest of that. So in fact, it's not as easy as it looks, and certainly there's a craft to writing, comic teleplays and screenplays and all the rest. So yeah, there's a huge art to it, as there is in music. I mean, you might be very talented and inclined to do music, but you have to learn how to do it. So it's a big job.
Yeah, and when you're writing, do you draft your work in longhand or a typewriter or a computer or?
So originally, my first novel, Winter Tulips, I wrote longhand, but I still now I write by computer, but I'll still print it up and try to edit it with a pen, kind of longhand. But
right.
So I mean. The computer is such an extraordinary thing, because I remember those days when we used to cut things out. You must remember them well, when you had to cut, white things out and all that.
Oh.
In fact, whiteout was a great innovation.
It was.
You had to retype whole pages usually. Yeah.
Liquid paper, and the guy from the Monkees, his mother invented it. So Michael Nesmith, his mother was the inventor of liquid paper. Yeah, I worked in radio for 30 years and used manual typewriters and electric up until 2000, I guess. So, yep.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah,
it's great. Joseph Kertes is here. This is Talking Books and Stuff. Last Impressions, his latest book, but lots more. So go to the library, check it out, bookstores. What's the hardest lesson you had to learn about being a professional writer, I guess, the book publishing business in general?
I guess the hardest lesson I learned was that it never gets any easier. I thought it would get much, much easier. I mean, certain things are certainly easier, but you're still always struck with, enormous doubt when you're writing. I'm writing another book now, and every day I write, I write scene or a part of a scene. I'm thinking, what the hell is this? Is this crap?
Yes.
Is this so? Usually I read it the next day. I think, yes, indeed, this is crap. So writers are riddled with doubt. The American writer Richard Bausch said, you can tell a real writer because they're the ones who are riddled with doubt all the time. Mavis Gallant said it was like being in a rowboat in the middle of the ocean. You just don't know where you're going. And even people like Alice Munro, who've now won the Nobel Prize, say that it's a great mystery. She doesn't know where she's going or why any day of the week. So,
yes, I know.
so that's the challenge is that you. I've been very lucky because I have been published, but I have several novels in desk drawers. They're not. They don't always work. When I won the Leacock Award, I thought I was the funniest writer of all time, and started writing really bad, funny books. So these things can hurt you too. And it's also a great mystery to me how one becomes successful, why one book sells millions of copies and why another one doesn't. It's a great mystery to me.
Yeah, well, it's like anything. Like my wife is a musician. She can play anything, organ and piano, great singer. Never did anything with it. We go to karaoke nights once in a while, and you'll hear some people with incredible voices, better than anything you hear on the radio, and they're just bus drivers or whatever. So talent, I guess, is one thing, but the hard work and the desire is two different things.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And speaking of advice on any topic, writing or otherwise, what's the best piece of advice anyone ever gave you?
So the best piece of advice, I remember the very first time I took to writing. I had studied English and loved literature and read so much literature. I wanted to be a writer. I kept saying I wanted to be a writer. And a friend of mine who had become a GP, a medical doctor, said that he said one night, I have these patients with all these bad habits, like drinking and smoking especially. So I tell them, they come to my office and I say, I'll make a deal with you. I want you to spend 4 weeks not doing your bad thing. Do not smoke for 4 weeks, and tell yourself every day, 27 days to go, 26 days to go, you'll be smoking again. And promise yourself that you'll be smoking or drinking again in 26 days, 25 days. And he said that he found that after 4 weeks, many of them had broken the habit, and they realized suddenly that they were free of it. So I took the opposite approach. I thought, I've been moaning and groaning about becoming a writer. I'm going to write for 28 days, and without fail, no matter if I have a bad cold or if I have to watch a baseball game, whatever it is, I have to spend my hours, even though I was working full time as well, devoted to a book. So after 4 weeks, I had found that I was writing a book. So you can actually form a habit that way too.
Yep.
And so I think I've heard over the years, especially because I did start that writing program at Humber, I heard over the years many people saying, I'm going to write a book. It's time for me to write a book. And I tell them that you must sit down at your computer or at your typewriter or at your long pad and start writing. It never happens in and of itself. And most of those people don't end up doing it because it takes so much devotion that they never get there. So that's the best advice. The best advice is stick to it. Be persistent as hell, and also don't be discouraged. Because the world out there is a mean place, and you try. Maybe your book isn't very good, but maybe it is good, and you're trying to put it out there. And be persistent, and don't be discouraged. Just keep trying. Because if you have a story to tell, then someone's going to like it.
Well,
and by the way, we're all worth a really good story. It's a question of how do you weave that into a novel or a short story or a poem or a play or a screenplay.
Yes. Yeah, that's what they say. Everybody has at least one book in them or one story.
Yes, that's right.
But the secret is getting it out there, even if it's just to your friends and neighbors. So I want to thank you very much, sir, for Joseph Kertes, for your time today. This has been wonderful. Tell us again about your latest book.
It's called Last Impressions, and it's just out today, actually. So I'm very happy about it. It's a mixture of comedy and tragedy, but I hope you laugh out loud and cry out loud.
Good piece of advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, too, very much.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.